The mahogany-paneled dining room at my parents' Westchester estate sparkled with crystal and silver as Sunday dinner reached its familiar crescendo of family criticism. I sat quietly in my usual corner chair, the one they'd relegated me to since childhood, close enough to be included, distant enough to be ignored. My simple black sweater and worn jeans stood in sharp contrast to my brother Marcus's $3,000 Tom Ford suit and my sister Victoria's designer ensemble that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "So, Emma," Marcus began with that particular smile he reserved for family humiliation, "still playing writer in your little apartment?" He gestured dismissively with his wine glass, the Bordeaux catching the chandelier light. "I mean, it's cute that you're still keeping a diary at 32. But don't you think it's time for some actual career planning?" Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and calculated. "Oh, come on, Marcus. Emma's artistic phase is charming. Remember when she used to show us those little story notebooks in high school?" She turned to me with mock concern. "Sweetie, you can't live off creativity and dreams forever. The real world requires actual income." Dad nodded gravely from the head of the table, cutting his prime rib with surgical precision. "Your mother and I have been patient, Emma, but this writing hobby has gone on long enough. Marcus has built a successful law practice. Victoria's pharmaceutical consulting brings in 7 figures annually. You're, what? Typing stories on your computer. She probably still thinks someone will discover her talent," Mom added, her voice dripping with that particular brand of maternal disappointment she'd perfected over the years. "Like those romance novels will suddenly make her the next. What's her name? That woman who wrote those vampire books?" "Stephanie Meyer," I said quietly. "Exactly." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "That's the problem right there, Emma. You live in Fantasyland. 1 in a million writers maybe, get lucky enough to make actual money. The rest spend their lives serving coffee and calling it supporting their art." The familiar sting of their words washed over me, but I'd learned long ago that engaging only provided them with more ammunition. Instead, I took a small bite of my salmon and watched the sun set through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the manicured gardens in golden light. "I'm just saying," Victoria continued, warming to the theme, "it's time to be realistic. You're 32, single, living in that tiny studio apartment in Queens. Meanwhile, Marcus just bought his second vacation home in the Hamptons, and I'm closing on that penthouse in Manhattan. Success isn't about following dreams, Emma. It's about making practical choices. Nobody reads your little stories anyway," Marcus added with a cruel chuckle. "I mean, where do you even submit them? Some online blog? Amateur writing forums?" He turned to our parents. "She probably has like 12 followers on whatever platform she uses." The conversation would have continued its predictable arc, 30 minutes of systematic dismantling of my life choices, followed by their generous offers to help me find real work in their respective industries, culminating in my polite decline and their frustrated sighs, except my phone buzzed against the table. The caller ID made my pulse quicken. Penguin Random House Office. I glanced around the table, but they were deep in discussion about Victoria's latest pharmaceutical deal, something involving regulatory approvals and international expansion. Perfect timing. "Excuse me," I said softly, sliding the answer bar. "Hello. Emma. Thank God I reached you." The voice belonged to Marcus Dole, though my family had no way of knowing that. "The board meeting just concluded. The acquisition is finalized, $1.2 billion for the entire Harper & Row Holdings portfolio. It's already trending worldwide across all publishing trade platforms." I kept my expression carefully neutral, though my heart raced. The months of negotiations, the careful maneuvering through holding companies and shell corporations, the painstaking process of building a publishing empire while maintaining my cover as a hobby writer, it had all led to this moment. "That's excellent news," I replied calmly, my voice carrying just enough to reach my family's end of the table. "Please proceed with the announcement. The Wall Street Journal wants a statement from you personally. Forbes is calling it the largest independent publishing acquisition of the decade. Your net worth calculations are, well, let's just say the financial press is having a field day." Marcus had stopped talking mid-sentence about his latest corporate merger. Victoria's fork hung suspended halfway to her mouth. Even Dad had paused in his systematic decimation of his dinner. "I see," I continued, still maintaining my composed tone. And the integration timeline? 6 months for full operational merger. Your existing portfolio. The literary agencies, the digital platforms, the international distribution networks. Everything flows seamlessly together. Emma, you've just become the single largest independent publisher in North America. The room had gone completely silent. Mom's wine glass sat forgotten, a red stain slowly spreading across the white tablecloth where she'd apparently missed setting it down properly. Publish that information, I said clearly, making sure each word reached every corner of the dining room. And schedule the press conference for Tuesday morning. Absolutely. Oh, and Emma? The Times wants to know if you're still planning to maintain your anonymity as E.M. Morrison, or if you're ready to reveal that the mysterious publishing mogul behind Morrison Media Group has been hiding in plain sight. I allowed myself the smallest smile. I think it's time for full transparency. Brilliant. I'll have the PR team coordinate everything. Congratulations, Emma. This acquisition officially makes you the youngest female publishing magnate in industry history. I ended the call and placed my phone gently beside my plate. The silence stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the soft ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. That was. I began conversationally, Vice CEO at Penguin Random House. Apparently the acquisition of Harper & Row Holdings closed today. $1.2 billion. I took a sip of water. It's trending worldwide, according to him. Marcus's face had gone an interesting shade of pale. You're CEO? Well, technically I'm the CEO. He's the president of operations. I cut a small piece of salmon. I acquired Penguin Random House about 18 months ago along with Macmillan, several literary agencies, and most of the major digital publishing platforms. The Harper & Row purchase just rounded out the portfolio nicely. Victoria's pharmaceutical consulting contracts suddenly seemed very small in the echoing silence of the dining room. You're saying? Dad's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. You own publishers? Yes. I dabbed my lips with the linen napkin. Morrison Media Group. Perhaps you've heard of it? We represent about 40% of all books published in North America annually. Including, I paused for effect, the entire romance novel division that apparently only 1 in a million writers can crack. Mom's hand was pressed against her chest as if she was having trouble breathing. Morrison Media Group. That's worth. According to Forbes' most recent estimate, about $4.7 billion, though today's acquisition will probably push that closer to $6 billion. I continued eating as if discussing the weather. The little stories you mentioned, Marcus? Last quarter they generated approximately $340 million in revenue across print, digital and international licensing. The antique clock chimed 7 times, each note falling into the absolute stillness of the room like stones into still water. But you live in that tiny apartment, Victoria managed weakly. You drive that old Honda. Tax efficiency, I explained patiently. Also, the apartment is actually the entire top floor. I own the building. The Honda belongs to my assistant. I prefer my driver when I need to travel, but I walk to most of my meetings in Manhattan. I smiled. You'd be surprised how much more productive you can be when you don't waste time on status symbols. Marcus was staring at me as if I'd suddenly grown a second head. The Morrison behind Morrison Media Group. Is you? Emma Morrison? Our Emma? Your Emma who apparently needed career guidance and practical life choices? I confirmed. Yes, that would be me. Dad cleared his throat several times before managing to speak. We had no idea. You never mentioned. Mention what? That instead of keeping a diary, I was quietly acquiring every major publishing house on the East Coast? That my typing stories on my computer involved managing international distribution deals and coordinating with film studios for adaptation rights. I set down my fork. Why would I mention that? You made it quite clear that my writing was nothing more than an amusing hobby. The doorbell's deep chime echoed through the house, and moments later, our parents' longtime housekeeper appeared in the doorway. Excuse me, Mr. Morrison, but there are several reporters at the front gate. Something about Ms. Emma and a major business announcement. That would be the Wall Street Journal, I said, checking my watch. Probably Forbes and Publishers Weekly as well. The acquisition made the evening news cycle. I stood, smoothing my simple sweater. I should probably head back to the city. I have a board meeting at 8, and the Times wants to interview me about the Morrison Media Group expansion into streaming services. Streaming services? Marcus echoed faintly. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple TV, they all need content. Turns out owning the publishing rights to thousands of novels puts you in an excellent position to negotiate film and television adaptations. I picked up my phone and car keys. Last month's deals should net about $200 million over the next 3 years. Victoria was still sitting frozen, her designer outfit suddenly seeming less impressive against the backdrop of a $6 billion media empire. You know what the funny thing is? I continued, slipping into my jacket. I actually would have loved to share this with my family. To celebrate the victories, discuss the challenges, maybe even get some advice on managing such rapid growth. I paused at the dining room doorway. But every time I tried to talk about my work, you reminded me that nobody reads my little stories. The silence followed me into the marble foyer, where I could see the cluster of news vans through the front window's security glass. Emma, wait, Dad called, but I was already opening the door. The evening air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the distant sound of reporters setting up their equipment. My driver was already waiting by the Tesla, engine running. "The penthouse, Ms. Morrison?" he asked as I settled into the back seat. "Yes, thank you, James. And call ahead. Let them know I'll need the conference room prepared for the emergency board meeting." I glanced back at the house, where I could see my family's silhouettes framed in the warm light of the dining room windows. It's going to be a long night. As we pulled away, my phone was already buzzing with congratulations from industry colleagues, interview requests from major publications, and strategic partnership proposals from entertainment companies worldwide. The diary Scribbles, that nobody read, had just revolutionized the entire publishing landscape. I settled back into the leather seat and opened my laptop. There were contracts to review, international expansion plans to finalize, and a streaming service launch to coordinate. The girl who supposedly lived in Fantasyland had quite a lot of very real business to attend to. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was my brother standing in the driveway, still wearing his expensive suit, watching my departure with an expression of stunned realization.